Hey, welcome to Hourglass Cinema, a variety show from victims and villains. And today we are showing The Long Night, which you guys can pick up on Blu-ray, DVD, and digital beginning April 5th. I'm here with the film's director, Mr. Rich Ragsdale. What's going on, my friend?
How's it going, brother?
Man, I am really excited to sit down and talk with you. Let me just say that up front. I really had a blast with this movie. You guys can check out our spoiler-free thoughts on it on our YouTube channel, along with the video version of what you guys are watching right now. But uh, I got a whole new appreciation for this movie watching the director's commentary, which is one of the special features on this movie. And can you guys talk about a little bit if people like are new to just kind of coming across this interview, what the long night actually is?
Well, I mean, it's a story about a couple that end up trapped in a house out in the middle of this in the South, and they're surrounded by a sort of mystical cult, malevolent sort of cult, and they're all wearing these kind of pagan masks and stuff, and things sort of spiral out of control from there. So
It's kind of become one of the catchphrase of this channel is that the less you know, the better the movie is.
yeah. Well, yeah, it's like I never know. It's like when people ask, it's like how deep do you go? Because you don't want to like spoil stuff for people who are, upset about spoilers.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about this movie coming into it. I knew that I'd seen The Mask, and I knew Scout Taylor Compton was in this movie, and I was like, those two reasons alone, I'll watch this movie. And
Yeah, I mean, any movie with
I
Scout did for me. So
yeah, I really like her as an actress. So she kind of is like I'll kind of just jump into anything she does. But I really liked this movie because it's a slow burn and it feels atmospheric. And I think that it leaves a good impression because while I it is in essence Scout's story is basically she's an orphan and she's trying to kind of find her own legacy and try and find out where she belongs. And I love that it starts from this really vulnerable place and it just goes to really unexpected territory.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean that was sort of by design. I think is like Scout is she's very sweet, but she's also actually a very tough girl. So, and I think that you don't get to see that side of her as much in movies. So we wanted to kind of give her a chance to sort of bring that out by the end of the movie. She kind of badasses it up by the end. So
This movie, like within like the first, I want to say it's like 10 to 15 minutes, there's a great foreshadowing shot of her just kind of yelling, and you kind of don't understand the context of it until like later on. So it really grips you right from that moment on. But what I found really fascinating is that you're not like this is not actually by design something that you had originally kind of gone through. This movie went through a couple writers and a couple directors. Can you kind of talk about how you actually ended up being in uh the final choice for this movie?
yeah, so there were, like you said, there were a couple of directors on this film before me, and it's never been totally clear to me what really happened, but I got a call from a producer who I've worked with a number of times, and he was like, "We have this movie in South Carolina, and it's in trouble. We need a director. Would you be interested?" So I took a look at it, and I was like, "Yeah, yeah, okay. I was, I sort of, I agreed to do it, and I flew out, and it was, they were basically at that point kind of out of money, and it was, I don't know. So it was just this kind. It was people had been messing with the script. The script was really, there were like 3 or 4 different versions. It was really messy. So I was like, okay, guys, look, I'll do this, but you have to hire my DP. You have to hire a writer that I know to kind of fix the script, because there were all these different versions and they were varying degrees of, like, people had just been tinkering with it in the interim. And so, that I had, they hired my friend Rob Shep to rewrite it. And I came in, it was like we had like about 10 days before we actually had to start shooting. They didn't have a cast at that point. The cast that they had left the film. And so, it was just this scramble to get things put together. It was a real chaotic kind of situation, but it was a lot of fun. It's kind of like a rescue mission, to kind of save this movie. Because if we hadn't come on, I think they would have just shut down production. There was like a crew that had been waiting around for about a month to start working. So they just burned through a lot of money. Yeah. So I wish I'd had that money in the front, but it's okay. I mean, not having any money forces you to be creative.
I gotta say too, like, had I not like listened to the director's commentary and kind of learned some of the facts about this, about the behind the scenes, like I never kind of would have known that stuff. Like I said, like I really enjoyed this film coming out of it the first viewing and going back into it with the director's commentary really made it all like really raised my level of respect for this movie, especially the fact that you guys, when you came into this, just to kind of give listeners slash viewers a picture of when Rich kind of came into this, it was essentially, if I remember correctly, it's like a week or two before you guys went into production. So it was like you hit the ball rolling.
Yeah, it was about 10 days. We got there and it was just like the masks that one of the directors had designed, or they weren't cool. I thought they looked kind of goofy, so Flora Ronzone, my costume designer, and I kind of just dug in, and I liked this idea of these kind of sort of pantheistic, kind of pagan sort of masks, and we sort of redesigned the cult a bit to sort of honor that idea of this sort of like a pantheistic approach, like a sort of a weird cult that draws from all these different cultures. And, we didn't have a lot of time, we didn't have a lot of money, but it was a way to kind of bring a lot of cool ideas in on the cheap, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and it's crazy when you like, because our show we've covered under our umbrella, we've covered the big Marvel movies, these like tentpole blockbuster movies, and we've covered small films like The Long Night. And it's crazy when you think about like how almost they mirror each other, like how you can take something that has like a really low budget and a shorter time span, and here you have billions and months, if not years, of planning and work, and how creative you can still see, telling these really compelling stories either way.
Yeah, and it was like I sort of looked at this as an opportunity to try out a bunch of ideas of things that are sort of interesting to me. There's sort of, we tried to kind of work in some sort of Lovecraftian cosmic horror ideas, and some like what it's a popular term now. It wasn't really when we started, but like this kind of folk horror idea, which is based on like regional cults. Because it's in the South, it already has that kind of folksy quality anyway. So these are things that I've always dug. And so we tried to kind of back these into, like the producers were like, well, you have to honor basically the structure of the original movie. So we were just kind of grafting ideas on and trying to kind of make it interesting, and kind of, there were a lot of sort of logic issues in some of the scripts they'd handed to me. So we were just trying to work all these things out, but it was fun. It's hard, stressful, but it was fun.
Now, what makes The Long Night such an interesting viewing experience is this movie is essentially broken up into 5 chapters. And when I say chapters, from a visual standpoint, is basically a black screen, and it has Roman numerals counting from 1 to 5, and then a chapter name. Can you kind of talk about where that idea came from?
Well, it was a helpful thing for my writer and I to discuss, like, well, because he was rewriting the script as we're shooting, even, so it was helpful to sort of break it into pieces and think about it in terms of kind of sections, and act, not just your sort of standard act breaks, but we also thought of it almost as like, these guys are, at first it's not clear what this cult wants, and they're performing a sort of a ritual across the film. And these chapter markers sort of delineate the sort of sections of the ritual as it goes. So yeah, I don't know if that's answer your question, but
Yeah, it does.
yeah, that was basically the idea, was to kind of break it apart into these sort of, so it also kind of gives you like some really big weird stuff will happen, and we can kind of take a little breath for a second and kind of reset the movie. And because we kind of slide in between realities, like this kind of surrealist stuff and the sort of temporal world of them being surrounded and trapped in this house.
It took me off guard the first time that I saw it, and then by the time that you kind of get to the second or third time, it flows really well with the film, and it kind of gives the film its own unique identity that I feel like when you do films like this, like you want to make sure. My wife just set off our smoke alarm. When you do things like this, you have to really set yourselves apart. And that's kind of the challenge of independent filmmaking sometimes, is how are you taking an independent stance against the bigger horror movies that are being released by Universal, Blumhouse, A24, and so on and so forth. And that's something that I really found myself as a viewer really wanting to really starting to like and gravitate towards, because it was something different.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely tried to, I don't know, put our own stamp on this thing, and it has, it has at the core of it a very straight linear story, but then we kind of veer off into these more surrealist moments that are kind of inspired by guys like Ken Russell or something, like kind of throwback trippy stuff that you might have seen in like a 70s movie. So yeah, I mean, we just kind of like, we had this opportunity. It was kind of like raw clay. You had this basic story that we had to honor, and then we were trying to shape it into something sort of interesting and unique,
So you're a man of many hats, as well as also you're a composer, but you didn't. This is like I believe you said the first feature you haven't composed,
yeah.
And also at the same time, like, you're also an animator. And talking about the animations for a brief second, because there are some very stunning animations in here, but also one reason that I would encourage listeners to pick up the Blu-ray is because your short film, The Loop, is also on here. And The Loop is a film that you not only also directed, but also wrote. And I'm going to take a stab in the dark and said that you also animated that one as well. Am I correct?
Yes, I did all the animation and the VFX in The Loop. Yeah, so, and there's even some like traditional hand-drawn animation and stuff in it. So
can you kind of talk about, because I do feel like animation is not a style that we see a whole lot of, and the animation within The Long Night is very subtle. Can you kind of talk about incorporating those elements into it, some of the challenges that you faced?
well, I mean, they actually arose out of the challenge of not really having much money. And so it's like we have these kind of surrealist moments where we, where I wanted things to be a little off kilter, and we didn't have all this time and money to go out and shoot these things that would, kind of create that vibe. So I had to do it myself, And so it was really just out of necessity. And some of these things I kind of designed, and they weren't maybe meant to be the final thing, but, as budgets are, we ended up keeping a lot of the stuff that was originally meant to be maybe instructive for a visual effects artist or something.
The Loop has like different animation styles, because it almost kind of has that like Saturday morning 80s, 90s cartoonish feel to it woven into its tapestry, but also at the same time it's got like, and I don't want to give too much away. It's a really fun short, but it like there's a moment in that film where like one of the characters has like laser eyes. I thought was it a nice cool thing to kind of see like a well-rounded portfolio of your animation skills.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, in the loop, of course, we were trying to sort of evoke all the 80s stuff. So there were like the sort of like back then they didn't have digital effects, so it was like everything was done optically. So we were trying to do animation to sort of match into like the kind of animated lightning bolts and stuff, like you're saying, lasers and lightning bolts you would see in movies like Back to the Future or something. So we just tried to, or Tron or something like that, so that was a real fun one to do. And we would actually, we have plans to turn it into a feature film. So
You have my attention at feature film.
we have a script. We're working on it now. So
I I grew up in the 90s, but my mom like introduced me to everything in the 80s, so it's like I feel like a kid of both of those generations.
yeah,
And I absolutely love 80s stuff. So like anytime that I get to see like a film or a short film that's like kind of like invoking the spirit of those that decade is just chef's kiss right there.
yeah. Well, the thing about the loop too is, I mean, like as much as I love like Stranger Things, to me, Stranger Things feels like a very contemporary feeling show that happens to be set in the 80s, if that makes any sense. It has a
Sure.
very contemporary sensibility. And the loop, we tried to make it feel like maybe something you could have actually, rented and watched on a VHS or something in the 80s, so like kind of more period specific, even with the kind of corny humor and everything.
And this is such a random question, and I don't want to give too much away, but have you seen Hellraiser Judgment by chance?
I don't know if I've seen Hellraiser Judgment. How far along in the franchise is that? Is it
That is the 10th one. This is the most recent
okay? Yeah.
one.
Okay. Yeah. No, I haven't seen it yet.
So, when we get done here, like just go look up, like Google it and like go to images because one of the characters in the loop looks an awful lot like a character from Hellraiser Judgment. So I
Ah.
didn't know if you knew that or not, but
No, like actually, it's funny because the design of the loop, the villain in the loop is meant to be sort of like a hybrid of every kind of 80s bad guy. So he's, disfigured a little bit like Freddy, and he wears a big long trench coat like a Cenobite, and he has a very distinctive weapon that you sort of associate with like Michael Myers or Jason or somebody. And he has that kind of sense of humor that's also very Freddy and Chucky kind of, like their sense of humor. So very referential and kind of goofy. So we were trying to kind of like take all of those guys and put them in a blender and kind of create a villain that was, an amalgam of everyone.
okay, that's fair. That's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't get that, but I like that.
Oh no, I mean, well,
Definitely
it's just I think it's meant to be felt more than maybe understood.
sure. I definitely feel like the sense of humor in with what you're talking about because the loop has a very weird sense of humor that you kind of would see with like Chucky or Freddy in the 80s.
Yeah, very sadistic. Yeah.
And coming back to the long night has these really oddly placed like comical moments too. And that was kind of some of my favorite spots in those, and a lot of those come from Nolan Funk, who plays Scout's boyfriend in this. And but kind of stepping back from them and kind of digging into the antagonistic villain of the Master and their army, because I don't want to spoil that twist. Uh, there is ranks that you guys talked about in the director's commentary, and I'm wondering if you cannot kind of explain where that idea came from, and like how in detail you guys actually got it in terms of like backstory with like the ranks and like how one enters into the society, but also at the same time like how one rises into the society.
Well, the idea of sort of creating almost a sort of militaristic hierarchy, like a military hierarchy, it came from the writer Rob. I mean, so he was like, that they would, if you look at them, I mean, they're all sort of flanked like a row of old timey soldiers or something. They flank the leader, and we we gave each one of the, we gave each of the, I mean, so there's in the design, there's probably about 6 different kinds of bad guys, and then, or 5. And in that, they all have a specific role if you watch the film sort of closely. And it was, for me on set, it was a very helpful way of thinking about it, because I could keep track of everything and organize things and direct guys to do specific things that would, like the guys with the sock uh, masks, that they don't have the animal masks. I mean, they were almost more like the privates or the drones, the sort of low ranking guys that did all the dirty work. And then there's the master, and the kind of the size of the horns sort of delineate how much power they have in their sort of social structure. And we didn't really discuss too much about how you might ascend through the ranks of the cult, but one would assume it would be, a tenured type of thing. And then of course there's the master, who is always the head of the thing, the general, if you're thinking about it in terms of an army.
Yeah, the master was something that really surprised me, the twist that came out of that, because it's also after a very interesting sequence that's all I will say. It's very interesting. I actually like rewound it and played that sequence for my wife, and she was just kind of wowed by it the same way that I was. So I like that you guys take risks in this movie, and that's what I'll say. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, I think I know the sequence you're referring to, and it's definitely a divisive thing. Like, I think some people, I mean, I knew going in that it was something I wanted to do, something I thought was cool. It was just an idea I had, a visual I thought was really awesome. And but I knew that it could easily be come across as like funny or disturbing or weird to different people, like so. But like you said, I wanted to do it, and I did it, and I thought that it was cool. So you have to just own it.
And so one of the things that I appreciate as a viewer and as a reviewer of this movie in particular is that there is a lot of layers to this movie, and a lot of them I don't think you get or understand why certain things take place, like the sequence we're specifically talking about. And when you go back and watch it on like a second or third viewing, and you kind of see how all of these weirder elements of the movie and even borderline cosmic elements, how they all kind of flow into this narrative that is Scout really trying to locate her lineage and her legacy. And that, I think, is the marks of a good movie, is when you can absolutely say, okay, I'm going to layer this so that people have to kind of come back and invest multiple viewings to really understand it. And some people might not, that might turn people off from this movie. So
Yeah, I mean, it might. Again, it was kind of funny, because when I came into it, because it wasn't this movie I set out to make. It wasn't a script we had developed or I had written, and it was coming at me so fast that there was kind of this attitude of like, yeah, what the hell? Why not? Let's just do this. What would be cool here? Let's do this. And then when we were editing, we kind of we carried that ethos into the post-production process, where it was like, well, yeah, it seems a little weird, but maybe that's it's like, if it's cool, we would go with it if we thought it made if it had some sort of, it's kind of like, I mean, I'm not comparing myself to David Lynch or anything, but in David Lynch's movies, like a lot of times the first time you see him, it's just, you kind of have no idea what the hell's going on, like a Mulholland Drive or something. But the more you
Sure.
watch it, they have this sort of internal dream logic that all starts making sense the more you watch it. And so, I mean, that inspires me. And so I thought we would try something like that with this, you know.
Well, I think it works. I think it works on, it's one of those things that you have to have like multiple viewings in order to kind of really uh understand it and kind of like accept it for what it is. So I'm gonna tell you guys to go in with an open mind. The movie is called The Long Night. It hits Blu-ray, DVD, and digital, as well as video on demand, beginning April 5th from Wellgo Entertainment. Rich, thank you so much. This, I highly recommend checking out the Blu-ray, just because you do get the bonus features. If you're like me, you're a cinephile, you love behind the scenes stuff. The director's commentary is great, as well as The Loop is such an extremely fun film. But Rich, where can people find you online?
I'm on all the sort of standard issue social media sites. So you can find me on Instagram under my name, Rich Ragsdale, same with Twitter, and also Facebook, And our production company has a website, which is knrproductions.com, knr-productions.com. And yeah, so that's it.
Well, thank you so much for your time. You guys go check out the movie, and just want to throw this out there. If you or someone you know is currently listening to this or watching this, and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, please understand that you are not alone, and that, much like Scout's journey throughout the course of this movie, that there is answers and that there is hope to see another tomorrow. So please check our mental health resource library. Link is in the show notes below, along with where you guys can also pick up The Long Night. Thank you guys, and have a good night.